In real estate, we deal with contracts and deadlines and negotiations. But sometimes we also walk with people through their deepest valleys. Selling a home after a loss, during a divorce, or in a crisis, it isn't just a transaction. It's grief showing up at the closing table. If we don't know how to respond, we risk pushing people away when they need us most. My guest today is Heidi Dunstan, a certified grief educator, international speaker, and best-selling co-author who founded Lean Into Grief after the sudden loss of her husband in 2018. Heidi teaches leaders and teams how to replace silence with presence, judgment with empathy, and fear with connection. She's been featured on podcasts and conferences worldwide, reminding us that grief is love, and it shouldn't be done alone. Today, Heidi will help us see how grief shows up in our business and more than we realize through death, divorce, downsizing, or even the loss of memories tied to a home. And she'll equip us with some practical language, tools, and awareness so that instead of pushing clients away, we can stay present and connected in their hardest seasons. Heidi, it's so great to have you here, and welcome to the show today.
Thanks so much for having me, Mark. It's an honor to be here alongside with you.
I've listened to some of your podcasts and some of your work, and it really resonates with me, the importance of talking with people that are going through difficult situations. And I know a little bit of your backstory. Do you mind sharing with the people that we're talking with today a little bit about how you got into the work that you're doing?
Yeah, for sure. Unfortunately, I came by it experiencing big loss. Like you mentioned in the intro, I lost my husband unexpectedly in 2018, just after Christmas. As I tried to navigate grief, I felt like I was going crazy. And so I stepped into the world of Facebook groups, learning from other young widows that I wasn't going crazy. But alongside that, I also learned that some of the things that people said to me in my grief that really kind of pissed me off, or the silence that I got from the people that I thought would show up, I was seeing a common theme in other people who were grieving. They had people that said things that missed the mark, or they had really people in their inner circle who went silence, and that silence was deafening for them. And I realized that it wasn't because we have mean people in our lives, it's just because we've never really been taught how to navigate grief and how to support people in grief. We live in a society that people think that, you just got to get better. And we want to fix people, and we have a really hard time holding space for people that are in pain or that are hurting. And so we often end up losing connection because we don't have the right words, and we're almost afraid to say anything because we're afraid we're going to say the wrong thing. And so I became certified in grief in the grief education program because I was like, we can't keep doing this. We can't just let grievers go and do counseling and do coaching with grief counselors and not have their people around them and having them to rebuild from nothing instead of going, hey, I need you to see me and love me exactly where I'm at. And so that's what I get to do today. And I love it. I love the fact that from the loss, losing my husband, Mike, who is an incredibly amazing human who I miss dearly, that I get to still be able to do the work, carry on some of that legacy, and help others not have such a hard time at a time when things are already so hard.
So it wasn't a project or a vocation that you were looking for. You were thrust into it through your own personal loss and got to experience probably the downside and the negative part of that. What led you to the point where you started reaching out to people and recognizing how grief is surrounding us in our society today?
Oddly enough, it was during COVID. So my husband died in 2018, late in 2018, and thrust into COVID just a few months later. And so I started on an audio only app called Clubhouse, and I was joining rooms and conversations about death and dying and grief. And a lot of times people were coming into those rooms saying, I don't know how to handle, my fiance who's had two major family losses, or my neighbor whose mom just died. And we would start unpacking it and we would start talking about it. And it isn't until you've gone through grief that you kind of realize the things that sting and the things that actually help. And I truly believe grief is as individuals, our fingerprints. So some of the things that may work for me may not work for everybody, and that's okay. But it's about being holding authentic space. So I really find that the conversation is needed, the conversation's wanted. There are so many people. I mean, one of my best friends phoned last night and said, I have a friend of mine who just invited me over today for a service. And as we live in Canada and we have MAID, medically assisted death, and his wife is dying by MAID today. And he's like, I'm not sure what to say to him today or what to expect. And so I was like, here's the two scenarios that I see that could potentially happen. And he was like, "Thank you. I feel more equipped to go into those conversations." So when I talk about lean into grief, it's oftentimes, and grievers will say this, they'll watch their friends and family cross the street and avoid them because they don't know what to say. And it's in those moments that we're meant to lean in and go, hey, I see you and I see this is hard. And so the conversation's wanted. I know that a lot of people turn around and say, hey, Heidi, I know I've said some really terrible things to people unintentionally. Um, and and I also really preface the fact that it isn't just around death. You know, in your intro, you talked about divorce. We talk about I mean, we're in September. There's a lot of parents right now grieving the fact that their kids went off to university or they're finished high school, that empty nest syndrome. We lose our parents. The world of dementia, we start losing them and they're still here. There's grief everywhere, and grief isn't just about death and dying, it's about change and loss, about anything in life. And so, you know, for you in the real estate world, some people might be retiring and going, I need to downsize. I can't afford the big house. I don't need the big house anymore. But the big house still comes with all the memories, right?
Yeah. And, honestly, I didn't look at grief the way that I look at it today until I met you and we had some of the conversations and things that we've talked about, because frankly, it was often just uncomfortable, not knowing what to say and not recognizing that, when we're dealing with people in all kinds of situations, whether it is an elderly family member that's suffering a loss, or somebody that's at our church that's suffering a loss, or somebody that's lost a child. I know changing careers can cause grief for people. And so I look at things quite a bit differently today. And it was sort of fascinating to sort of merge what I was learning from you with what I'm trying to teach my salespeople, which is we need to have connections with our customers. We need for them to trust us. And so often, not being able to deal with their grief makes our communication really poor at best, and it can ruin a relationship at worst.
Or it could really benefit your relationship, right? Imagine if you actually showed up and said all the right things and actually made somebody feel like they were seen and heard and loved exactly where they were at instead of judged, that you may turn around and get another call down the road when they're ready to buy or sell a house, right? I mean, you know, this referral business is such a big part of the real estate world. And when all of a sudden you've allowed somebody to feel like they mattered at a time when they're so hurt or devastated, it could really mean that you show up and you're memorable because you've made them feel memorable in a really good way. And I mean, you and I talked about this in prep of this call. I mean, I own my own business. I do other things outside of the grief space that I do. And I had a client who I was serving, and my husband died at Christmas time. And so it took a little while. It took almost 2 weeks to be able to have his service. And she came to the service. She lived in the same city as me. The service was on a Friday, and on a Sunday, I got an email that said the list of things to do for Heidi is growing. Are you going to be back at work on Monday, or should I find somebody else? And no different in real estate. You guys have lots of vendors and brokers and lawyers and home inspectors and all the trades that you might need to fix something up. And if they're going through grief and you handled that like that, you may end up losing a lot of your vendors as well, right?
Yeah. Well, I can share that after 40 years of being in the business and talking with a lot of different agents doing transactions, that there are a lot of clients and vendors and other affiliated agents that we do business with that go through life. I mean, grief is a part of life. And when they're going through that, when we don't handle it, I mean, I've seen some of the worst behaviors. I mean, and I hate to even share some of my own because I made a few big blunders. I made some real big blunders, looking back over the years. One instance I remember was there was a family that had a property that had been in their family for over 100 years. And they simply could not get past the emotion of the loss of that property. Even though they wanted to sell, I didn't do business with them because I couldn't get past the logic part of the transaction, while what they were really doing was grieving the process of having to go ahead and sell the property.
Yeah. And it's one of those things as a real estate agent, getting creative and going, hey, like, tell me about the stories of this home. Tell me what you remember, and listening to them. And then going, I wonder if I could go in and take some photos. Maybe there's that growth chart on the wall. Could I get somebody in to cut that board out and put a new board in so they could keep the board, not the whole house? Or maybe if they did do the transaction, that you could go in and photo or video the room when you're prepping the house, and give them those mementos, right? Thinking outside the box, where it's like, I mean, people do that all the time. I just had a conversation with somebody, and I was like, you know, she was like, my mom has so many clothes. Her mom passed last Christmas. And I said, what if she's like, and they were really high end, high quality clothes. I don't want to just donate them. And I said, what if you were to cut little swatches out of them and make a quilt and keep the extra swatch? And every trip you go on, you release a swatch of your mom's clothes. And she's like, oh my gosh, that's so beautiful. I said, because then you don't have to have like 9 bins of clothes. And so finding places where people can hold on to the mementos and the memories, because that's what they're afraid to lose. They're afraid that that's going to fade away.
Yeah. I love what you just shared. There are plenty of real estate brokers that I work with that are very creative in their marketing. They're very creative in the way that they approach prospecting and interacting with their folks. And I know that with that one idea that you just gave about somebody that's going through grief, to find a creative way to honor the memory and to honor the person. I know some people are going to take that nugget away and they're going to put it into action in their business. So thank you for that.
Ask the questions though. And be willing to hold the space for the time. And I know that it sucks as a real estate agent because you end up spending so much time. But when you hear those stories and you learn that the Christmas tree was in that corner, and you could go in and take a picture of that corner, or you could go in and take a picture of the kitchen or whatever, and put together one of those memory books on like what that Costco does, or like, I forget, there's a lot of websites. And that could be part of your closing gift, to be able to say, hey, like, I know this isn't an easy transaction. And that you're having to release a home, not a house, but I want you to have your memories. I want you to have this keepsake. That can like, it brings tears to
Yeah.
my eyes, and I don't even have the house. So,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like,
Well, and I can share when I'm dealing with real estate people and clients right now, there is such a dichotomy going on in our business. And this is sort of going to go off in a little bit of a tangent, is that we live in an exciting time where AI and technology is allowing us to do things that it's hard to even imagine that we can do. And some people are really open to that and some people are not. But the biggest problem is that we don't remember that we're human beings. And it is the connection that we have with other human beings that no AI software can deal with. It can't replace it. I mean, the way that we feel about each other can't be replaced by technology. And I think there's a lot of people that are missing that. So, I want to move into something that I know you and I have talked about a little bit, which is, some of the things that people say that they think are normal or good conversations, and you've used the word platitude to describe it. Can you share the biggest mistakes that we're making?
so we live in this world that we tend to want to kind of cover off, like, and just platitude it. We want to give a statement that kind of says it's okay. It's okay that you're not okay, but sometimes it really can be hurtful. So some of the ones that we often say is, at least they're not suffering anymore, because maybe the person was sick, but the person right in front of you is suffering, right? And so it can be really minimizing. And I never say it. I have a friend who lost her husband to ALS. which is a brutal disease that includes a lot of suffering. But I didn't talk about suffering until she was ready to talk about it. I waited till she said it. So it's not to say we don't get to pretend that they didn't suffer, but it's a matter of I want to acknowledge her suffering because she's right in front of me. So the other one is any statement that starts with at least. At least they're not suffering anymore. At least you can get another dog. At least they're with God now. At least I was like, at least you're young. You can find love again. Because Mike died the day before my 40th birthday. All of those at least really, again, minimize and they don't serve. So any statement that says at least, it's like, just don't use it. We often will lean into faith. You talked about church earlier, and it's a slippery slope because, you say to somebody who's lost a child, well, at least they're with God. But if they're mad at God right now
Yeah.
because it never makes sense to bury a child, I let them dictate that conversation. I don't dictate it for them. Those platitudes can be really, really difficult. And what I tend to say to people is listen and use the words that they use. So if they use the word, that their grandmother passed away, I use passed away. Or if they lost their grandmother, they lost their grandmother. Or if someone died, I use the word died. If you don't use the words that they use, it's like nails on a chalkboard. All right. So, and we all do this. Don't get me wrong. I did it too. I did it to a gentleman. I said, I understand. Somebody had shared with me that you lost your brother. He's like, I didn't lose my brother. He died. Right? And what do you do when somebody gets mad at you? You kind of go into your turtle shell. And that's actually when you're meant to say, hey, you know what? You're right. Your brother died and I didn't mean to upset you. I didn't also want to pretend like there wasn't a significant thing going on in your life and that you matter to me. And I wanted to be able to say, I'm thinking about you. And is there anything I can do to support you? And those sentences can make a lot more difference. The difference between call me if you need me to is there anything I can do to support you today? Very big difference, right?
Well, the thing with faith that you're talking about is I've seen very, very faithful people move away from their faith when they're in grief. And you certainly don't want to make it worse. So that's a good tip there. I like what you shared about, is there anything I can do to help you? It's the wrong one because nobody's going to ask for help. They're going to go hide it. They're going to go hide is what they're going to do. So what are some positive things that you can say?
Most people will say, call me if you need me. And they don't know what they need. So you need to say, hey, I'm going to pick up groceries. Do you need anything? Or I'm driving the kids to school or picking them up from sports. Would you like me to pick your kids up? Or it's autumn now and the leaves may need to be raked. Hey, do you want some support with that? Can we pop over and help? Right? Because everything right now when you're in the midst of grief can be overwhelming. So some positive things I encourage, instead of asking, how are you? When we ask somebody, how are you? We expect to hear good, fine, or okay. When you're grieving, you're none of those. So ask, hey, how's today or how you're holding up? Allow them to be honest. And they may be brutally honest and they may say they're okay. You do what you guide on based on how they respond. But they may say, I really miss my person, or I just want them back, or I'm not sleeping, or I'm not eating. Let them be real with you because their life is hard. And sometimes they just need somebody to hold that for them. And as a real estate agent, you might go, my gosh, that sounds exhausting. I want you to lean into the connection and thank them for trusting you. I want you to lean in and go, they wouldn't just share that with anybody if they didn't trust them. So thank them and be grateful for that connection because oftentimes it's the people that show up that make them memorable. And so keep showing up and keep going, I see you, and do it without judgment. The hard part is when we look at how people navigate pain, we typically go, why are they crying so much? Why aren't they crying? Why haven't they taken off their wedding band yet? Well, it's been 6 months. Are they over it yet? And we move into that judgment space, and it really doesn't serve anybody. It doesn't serve you as a real estate agent, and it won't serve the people in front of you. So if you just acknowledge, hey, losing a parent is a significant loss, or dementia is such a roller coaster of a disease, like they have a good day and a bad day, and that has to be really exhausting. Acknowledge what you see. The first 3 months after I lost Mike, I lost 30 pounds, and Mark, I got the weight to lose. It's not that I didn't need to lose it, but everybody talked about how good I looked and how, like, I had lost all this weight. I had one friend who said, "Hey, Heidi, have you lost all this weight because 'cause you're not eating? How about you come over and bring some, like, Tupperware containers? I'm gonna make you dinner, spend the night, watch a movie. We'll eat popcorn or ice cream or whatever you want, and I'll send you home with leftovers so that you don't have to cook." And so see those changes and go, "Hey, I see life's hard right now. Is there something I can do to support you?"
So there's some creativity, I think, in listening, and finding the appropriate response. One thing I know is that we run into people that are grieving in our personal lives, and we also see them in our business lives. And our relationships with people in our business lives tend to be a little bit different. So what I'm looking for is sort of two things. One is that I know people sort of disappear after the funeral and they get abandoned by all their people. And so they end up going through grief alone. So can you talk a little bit about, how you can love on someone that has lost somebody over a time until they've worked through a lot of it? And then maybe give some practical ideas so that people can incorporate into their business when they know somebody's going through grief. How do they acknowledge it without calling them every day and say, "Are you doing okay today?" How can they do it appropriately within their business?
I mean, social media makes it a little bit easier because people often many times will post something, so you'll be able to see that they're navigating something. For example, I have a good friend of mine, today is the anniversary, first year anniversary of his wife's passing. So it's like, last night I reached out and I was like, "Hey, I'd love to have a conversation with you if you feel up to it today." Marking things in your calendar, the if it was a mother, like acknowledging Mother's Day or Father's Day, their birthday potentially, and just reaching out around that time saying, "Hey, I'm thinking about you." I even will acknowledge, especially in that first year. So say the person died on the 15th of the month. I often will be cognizant that that day, the 15th of every month, is often can be very challenging. And so it might be a day that I let them be in their space, or I might be just like, "Hey, I'm thinking about you today, sending you a hug." And so, or you just came across my mind and I wanted to reach out and let you know that who you are makes a difference. We often lean into telling people they're strong, but when they're moving into grief, they don't feel strong. They often feel pretty broken. And so I really acknowledge the courage that they're experiencing, that they're sharing with us. It takes a lot of courage to get out of bed every day. It takes a lot of courage to have to go through all of these belongings. you know, I acknowledge the people that are around them and supporting them and saying, "Hey, I'm really glad that you have a support network." Because sometimes it can be really overwhelming to do it all by yourself. And sometimes humor, depending on the person. You kind of have seen me outside of, and so I kind of have but be gentle with it, right? Time and
Yeah.
place. But yeah, and use the person's name that they've lost. Don't always be like, "Hey, your dad," or this. And sometimes if you don't know, ask their name. And just because guess what? Like oftentimes they miss them so much and there's no places and spaces that's talking about them. So it feels significant. So doing that can be really, really helpful. And then in business, when I shared with you about the lady who was like, "Hey, when are you back to work or should I hire somebody else?" You can navigate conversations like that quite simply by, "Hey, I just want to see, where are you at? Like, how are you holding up? What do you need from us? Are you needing more time?" Engage that way and don't turn around and be like, "Well, we're going to find somebody else." You know what? Because my response was, "Find someone else, period." And the relationship is done. Whereas if she would have been like, and I had other clients who did this exactly, they were like, "Hey, Heidi, you're important to us, and this is a significant loss. And we know your whole world is upside down and inside out. What do you need from us?" And I was like, "I just need a couple more weeks to navigate some legal stuff, and then can we have a conversation?" And they're like, "Yeah." And when we had that conversation, my world, and because you know me outside of the grief space as well, is that my world has a lot of deadlines. And I said, "I can't do like, hey, I need this in 2 hours right now." Because sometimes I sit down and 2 hours just disappeared and I don't know where they went. And so please give me something with a longer period of when you need it back. And then also in business, understand with grief that it takes your brain away and things get all discombobulated. So asking, like, hey, would you like me to send you a calendar request? Do you want me to follow up with a text the night before? Just to remind them, because sometimes life gets really hard and it isn't just the grief, it's all the dynamics that go with it and the drama that comes with it. And I'm sure you've seen this with divorces or even with like family losses in a house where not everybody gets along and all the drama comes alongside of it. And so turning around and saying, I know that, keeping all the balls in the air, like, I see how much you've got on your plate. Would it help if I sent you this? Would it help if I did that? What would support you? Can really make a difference in acknowledging the fact that life isn't normal for them and being able to give them what they need, because when they drop a ball, it can activate their grief where they're like, I never would have dropped that ball before so and so passed away, or before I went through a divorce, or before my kids moved away. So acknowledging the fact that you're willing to support them and know that their strengths may not be their strengths right now.
So as I'm sitting here, what's going through my mind as I'm listening to this is that when people are going through grief, the best thing that we can do is not to judge what they're going through, but to ask them, how can I solve the problem or be a part of the solution rather than sort of pushing you and prodding you to get over it, for lack of better phrase, which doesn't work. I mean, you can't do that.
And know that, like, those scheduling of text messages and calendar requests, that could be what you do for your normal clients every day. Like, your little AI bot or your virtual assistant could be doing that stuff already. But the words alongside asking them, and then also saying, hey, can I do this? Even though you're already doing it, allows them to know that you are acknowledging that their life isn't normal right now and that they're juggling a lot and you want to do what you can to support them. And it makes them feel special, seen, and heard. And in the business that you're in, that is important. They're not just another
Well,
client then.
far too many people think that they're selling houses and they're pushing paperwork and they're taking pictures, but that's really not what we're doing. What we're doing is we're interacting with people and the trust and the faith that they have in us. And if we ruin that relationship, we've ruined the thing that makes us different than a computer or an AI bot or some of the other things. Lots of compassion, I think, in the way that you're talking about interacting with other people.
Yeah. It's about holding space and like doing it with compassionate background and saying, I see this isn't how you wanted life to be right now. And know that, and acknowledging the roller coaster they're on. And they're going to, when they drop the ball on something and they miss a deadline, or maybe they missed an appointment or a showing, and it's, instead of being like, hey, I really needed you to show up, being like, hey, I see things are hard. We can get that rescheduled, or let's see what we can do to make that work, right? Like, it's acknowledging that they didn't do this intentionally, right? It can
Yeah.
make such a big difference in being able to say, hey, you know, their world, the way I always say it is, the world keeps on spinning and their world has stopped. And when they are venturing out and trying to buy or sell a house, the world is spinning way faster than they're moving. And they feel like they're caught in this loop that they can't catch up. It's really hard. And it's really hard when they realize that their person isn't there, or the relationship is dissolved, or that their kids have moved on. Like, all of them are significant and with different emotions that go with them.
I know there are a lot of real estate salespeople that are extraordinarily good at getting connection with their clients. And sometimes I think in ways they may even overstep their bounds and get too emotionally involved in a lot of the different things. And I'm not talking about not caring. What I'm talking about is when they get themselves burned out. Are there any boundaries or self-care that you would recommend for anyone, let alone a real estate person that is dealing with somebody with grief so that they don't find themselves suffering as a result of it also?
Yeah. Again, I really lean into the thank you for trusting me. And I'm grateful because I know I'm making that connection. And so I walk away from those conversations truly grateful to be able to hold that space. Okay. Now, don't get me wrong. There are times, especially when I spend time with other people who have lost spouses, I empathize at a level that I never thought I was able to until I feel it so deeply. And so I often have a good cry, and I'm not afraid to cry, as I just believe it's my heart's way of communicating to say, hey, like, let this out. But I really lean into I'm grateful that somebody's trusted me, and I'm grateful that I'm able to build that relationship, especially when it's unexpected. Nobody expects their real estate agent to connect with them, right? In fact, a lot of people kind of almost dread that whole relationship. And so when all of a sudden it's like, hey, that person showed up in a way that I needed and wasn't expecting it, it can be really cool. And so lean into how that goes. And also know that when they share the hard stories, because guess what? Lots of the grief that you guys are dealing with comes with a lot of conflict, right? And so oftentimes you're going to hear some of that of like so and so is trying to get this much for the house, or so and so doesn't want to sell the house, or so and so, right? And you're going to get all of that conflict. Hold the space and let it go. And whatever that process is for you, letting it go, you know me, I live in Mexico in the wintertime. I go and stand and put my feet in the ocean and I let the ocean carry my stuff away. In the wintertime, if I'm, not near the ocean, then I light a candle and I really just set the intention that that wasn't mine to hold. Wasn't mine to hold for a long time. It's almost like me carrying somebody's groceries to the door and I let them go and it's not mine to carry on anymore. Right. And so I really lean into I'm grateful that somebody's trusted me with that rather than, "Oh god, that was heavy and gross."
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I talk with salespeople a lot about being versatile with different personality styles. And, what we're talking about today is not necessarily being versatile with a personality style, but with a season in someone's life. When you have a client that's going through this season, there are things that are appropriate. There are things that would be appropriate to do and things that would not be appropriate to do. So, what I'd like for you to do is share with our listeners today, where they can find out more about what you're doing, because not everybody that is a real estate agent only experiences grief with their clients. I mean, there may be some people that want to learn about how to get better with grief in other circumstances as well.
Yeah, for sure. Feel free to check me out at HeidiDunstan.ca. I often on my website I schedule a masterclass, a complimentary masterclass. It's usually about half an hour where I do a little bit of a presentation, similar kind of content to what we talked about today. And then I turn the recording off and people just talk. And sometimes it's somebody who's grieving going, somebody said something really hurtful, or I never really realized why it never felt right until you talked about it. Or other people are like, "Hey, I'm experiencing this right now." And right on the call, we unpack it as a group and kind of give people tips. And I love being able to support that and being able to help that. Or I offer workshops and kind of trainings that I typically will do with like salespeople and things like that. So reach out if I can support in any way. I do. I believe that we all deserve to have these skills and it'll help develop and build better relationships all around, whether it be in business or in life.
Have you ever seen the quote by, I think it's Washington Irving, on the sacredness of tears?
Share the quote and I'll tell you.
Well, I think it starts out there's a sacredness in tears. There's something that I really loved about what you shared about sitting with people and being able to let those feelings show, to make that connection and let them show. There is something very sacred about letting all of that pain go and get washed away in tears. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, I think tears for me are a language of my heart. They're the ones that don't I can't put words to. And so when I have tears, it's because the words are not enough. And I mean I can cry when I'm grateful. I can cry when I'm happy just as much as I can when I'm sad. But I could tell you that for me as I navigated grief, the people that didn't try to silence my tears, the people that were willing to let them just let me blubber through, I truly cherish in my life. I recently saw a gentleman who did that, and I was like, that moment we went for lunch and I just sat and cried and cried and cried. He's like, yeah, vaguely, and I'm like, I cherish that day. Like I cherish the fact that you didn't try to fix me. You weren't throwing Kleenex in my face, telling me to stop crying, that I'd make you cry too. You just let me be. you acknowledge the fact that this is hard. And so, and I'm a sprinkler, Mark. When somebody's crying, I often will cry alongside with them. And it just allows for connection. It's a beautiful way to connect. And sometimes it allows us to release our stuff all at the same time. So it can be multi-purpose.
It wasn't too long ago recently that some friends of ours through church, they had lost a son. I want to say he was in his early 20s, and he had battled brain cancer, 7, 8, 9 years, and it had gone into remission, and that it had come back, and they didn't have a lot of time once it came back with him. And one of the comments that was made in our group as we were praying was, somebody said, I just don't know how you can get through that, how you can get through that. And one of the people said something that was really profound. They said, there is no path, but we do. Somehow we do. And I think with the work that you're doing, it will take the burden off of a lot of people to have somebody carrying that load together. So I can really appreciate that.
Yeah, and I just want to, I mean, one of the reasons why I do what I do is because when we don't learn how to support people in grief, we lose the legacies of those we've lost. And so, I don't have children, but I've watched a lot of parents who have lost children. I can't imagine what it would be like for them if the legacy of their child couldn't carry on because the people around them weren't equipped to handle conversations. And I mean, I even say that about Mike. He was an amazing human. And it would be tragic if I curled up in a ball and withered away in my grief, right? It meant that we lost two great people. And so when people show that resilience and that courage to be able to walk through it, and there's going to be places and spaces where their grief is going to come out, and it could be 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road. I want people to remember that with deep grief comes deep love, and it wouldn't hurt if they didn't love their person. And all they're doing is learning how to love them in a new way.
Yeah, that's where I was going. I wanted you to share your belief that grief is love. It's a different manifestation, I think, is what you're sharing.
It is, yeah. I mean, people around us die all the time, and we move on. We move through. But when we lose somebody that we cherish, we have to find a way to move forward, holding on to those memories, holding on to what's important to us. And we deserve to have that. The memory of the person they've lost deserves that. And those around us, we benefit from it too, if we allow it. We deserve all
Awesome.
to grieve with grace together, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I think when we're young, we don't think that we're going to have a lot of grief in our life, but the older we get, or the older I've gotten, the more I've recognized that that is something that just comes with part of being living.
It is, yeah. Thank you.
Well, in closing, Heidi, I want to say thank you for sharing your wisdom and compassion to this conversation. You've reminded us that selling a house isn't always just about square footage or contracts. It's often about people navigating life's hardest transitions. And for those listening, I encourage you to connect with Heidi and explore her Lean Into Grief resources. Adding grief awareness to your skill set doesn't just make you a better agent, it makes you a better human being. And if this episode gave you a new perspective, share it with a colleague, and don't forget to subscribe to the Time-Tested Mastery Life Lesson Cell podcast on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. Together, let's keep building businesses and relationships on a foundation of success. Remember, your business isn't just a machine, it's a mission to live. So until next time, keep building with purpose.